When you don't go to Geico.com, car insurance can seem intense. Like breakup R&B intense.
I thought you said you loved the sweater that I got you. If you didn't, you could have told me.
Geico makes it easy. Just go to Geico.com anytime to update or check your policy without all the extra drama.
I even had a gift receipt.
Blog Talk Radio.
Going to dare to travel in the spaces between the lines. This is Shadow Travels with your hosts, Kevin Cook and Ray Cezone.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Shadow Travels. If you're following us, we are on location, a pre-investigation show tonight. Probably be an abbreviated one, about a half an hour or 45 minutes or so. But we are here at the Bull's Head Inn in Cobleskill, New York. We're going to be talking with the owner, Chris Guldner, as well as a couple of former employees and possibly a former patron who have witnessed a lot of the activity here at the inn. I just want to remind you, if you'd like to call in and ask questions or make a comment, the number to call in is area code 516-387-1922. Okay, so I have Chris right here with me live, and hopefully it's going to come through okay. So first of all, thank you for having us, Chris. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, Kevin, and I'm glad to be part of your program.
Wonderful. Could you give us just a brief history of the land itself and the inn? I know that there's some things that were here before the inn was here.
Sure. Back in mid-1700s, Log Cabin was built, one of the earliest settlers. In fact, it was built 3 times and burned down 3 times. During the French and Indian War and the Revolutionary War, there were raids on Cobleskill, and the earlier establishments were torched and burned to the ground during those raids. And then this inn was built in 1802 that stands today.
Okay. And this at various times was an inn, but it was also a private residence as well.
Right. It was originally built as an inn in 1802 with guest rooms upstairs and a tavern on the first floor to accommodate travelers who were going back between New York City and central New York. This was a stopover point. That worked great until the Erie Canal was built and then people bypassed Cobleskill and took the waterway. And from that point on, in 1839, it was a private residence for 150 years.
And the last owner, or I guess when did it cease becoming a private residence? In the 60s? Was that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, in 1966, a gentleman by the name of Monty Allen, who was actually mayor of Cobleskill at one point, he bought the building from the estate of Mr. and Mrs. John Stacy after they passed, added an addition for the kitchen, and returned to the Bull's Head Inn as a restaurant. No guest rooms, but he put a bar and a restaurant in the building, and it returned again as the Bull's Head Inn.
Now, this is also, we can kind of segue over into when the activity started, was when he did this. And if you could speak to who the Stacys were a little bit more, because I know they play into this, possibly into this activity that happens.
Yes, it's interesting and somewhat humorous. Mrs. Stacy was a member of the Women's Christian Temperance Union, and Mr. Stacy liked to drink a lot. So that was their background, and when Monty Allen built the restaurant and put a bar in what used to be her house, evidently she didn't particularly care too much for that. So she is purportedly the spirit that haunts the Bull's Head Inn.
Now, do you know, is Monty Allen still alive? Is he passed away? Or is
Monty Allen has passed.
Okay. Did you ever have the chance to meet him?
No, I'm a newcomer to Cobleskill.
Okay.
I moved here to Schoharie County about 4 years ago.
Okay. I was wondering if he was very forthcoming about his experiences here, if you heard anything about him, or if he downplayed it.
From my knowledge of the history, especially when Monty Allen ran it, I think he would have downplayed it, because the Bull's Head Inn at that point was a very upscale restaurant. Gentlemen were required to wear jackets and ties, and I think he wanted to maintain a certain aura about the place and probably would have discouraged discussion about paranormal activity.
And owners since then have been a little more forthcoming with what has happened or what they've witnessed, as far as you know, from what you've heard.
After Monty Allen sold the place to Howard Snyder and his partners in 1978, they dug the cellar out under the building and put a tavern down there. And they started playing up the idea that there is haunted history to the building. And at that point, people became more aware of the goings-on in the building.
Now, let me ask you, we asked this a lot of our guests, especially a few weeks ago we had on Chef Dominic, who's the owner of the Naples Hotel out in the Finger Lakes, and very similar style building, very similar stories, and he told us that prior to him purchasing it, he was not a believer in any of this, and we hear that all the time from people. So I'm curious, were you a believer, were you not, were you on the fence, how were you prior to buying this?
I'm a spiritual person, so I believe in that dimension, regardless of art. I believe in a higher power. Okay? But in terms of maybe let's just call it the darker side of what we're referring to. I never had any experiences prior to owning the Bull's Head, and probably dismissed a lot of the discussion. Although I've got some close friends who would swear by their experiences, and who am I to discount what they experienced and believe? It's just my own personal experience. Prior to buying the Bull's Head, I wasn't there.
Okay.
However, since purchasing,
that was going to be my next question.
Things have changed. And having gone through, an engineering schooling, and try to convince myself that there's an explanation.
Apply the rational to this,
So when I was standing in the kitchen one day with my back to the hand wash sink, I was talking to three guys in the kitchen who were facing me. And while talking to them, all of a sudden I heard the faucet come on directly behind me. Natural reaction would be to turn around and look who's turning the faucet on.
Absolutely. Right.
There's nobody there.
Right.
There's nobody else in the room. So being energy conscious, reached over and shut the faucet off.
So I'm curious the handle, not only was the water on, but the handle had been moved to turn the water on. Or was it still in the off position?
No, it was one of those twist type faucet handles that you rotate the hot water handle to turn the hot water on. And it was fully on. It was fully off when I was talking to these guys, and it was fully on. I reached off and shut it off. So knowing that they were facing me, I asked them. I said, "Did you just see that happen?"
Right.
And with dumbfounded expressions on their face, they just nodded in disbelief. Having to sit there and watch the faucet by itself. And that type of activity is very typical to what a lot of other people have experienced here, and I'll just refer to it as mischievous activity.
Okay. And it's something we like to bring up all the time, but we mention always a lot of the questions we get when we go places from maybe, I don't know, the general public that's around is that, there's something evil, there's something scary, there's something. 99.9% of the time, that is not the case. And as a matter of fact, I don't even know if we've run into anything in over 2 years or almost 2 years of doing that. Generally, this is the case, is things are mischievous, things are, kind of playing around with you a little bit to grab your attention, to see if they can get a reaction out of you, so to speak. How about some of the other employees or patrons, not the two that we're going to hopefully speak to, but some other stories that have occurred here?
Okay. Well, another event that occurred since my ownership occurred during the construction phase, because we did a full restoration of the building. We had a lot of contractors in. One work here. It was probably about an hour each way.
Okay.
So he put in some late nights.
Sure.
And some nights he was here by himself. Worked with his son a lot, but on one occasion he was here by himself. And it was in the winter. You know, it's dark early, so he's working here with his work lights on the second floor. And it was at a point where we were just starting to hang the doors in the archways, having finished a lot of the carpentry. And just prior to doing so, we've got a lot of the door slabs stacked up against one wall, leaning at a pretty good angle against the wall. And he's working in the adjacent room, and having put those doors there himself, he is aware of their position. So while he was working that night, all of a sudden, the door furthest out from the wall stood up and fell over and slammed to the floor. And he immediately packed up and left for the night.
Yeah, as almost anybody would, I have to imagine. Oh.
And so he's experienced other things like that in other buildings.
I was going to ask you. Okay.
He's done a lot of work in Saratoga Springs.
Okay.
And old remodels
that
had some history.
Sure.
And he was convinced prior to working on our establishment that there is paranormal activity.
Something here.
There's something going on. And he inquired about that when he first came onto the job site, if we had experienced anything. And then when he finally did, I will unnerve not being able to explain it. And after that, he didn't work by himself at night.
He didn't. Now, where in the building, we know that there's the basement, there's the main floor, there's the second floor, which we're on right now, and then the attic. Where does the majority of the activity seem to happen?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because it is very frequently answered. And a question is asked by people who've had experiences here. At the top of the stairs, going to the second floor, second door on the right. Right in that area, outside that hallway to what is the ladies' room. There's a ladies' restroom right there. It's been reconfigured since we took over the building. So it's not the same layout, but that area is the same function. So upstairs ladies' bathroom area is what I just call the hot spot.
It is,
Anybody who's coming here, we've had the meeting groups, we've had other paranormal investigative teams, and then the history of the reports seem to point that
seems to be the area.
That's the area.
What are they noticing? Are they noticing, full apparitions that come in and out? Are they noticing sounds or just lights in general, or is it everything?
It's interesting. It's not as much as the mischievous activity that is reported elsewhere. It is apparitions and energy level.
Really?
There are numerous reports of apparitions in the ladies' room, at the top of the stairs, and down that staircase. So I haven't seen any apparitions in the building. There are people who are sworn by what they saw, and it typically is a woman's figure. And there are numerous reports of sensing energy level. People have walked up the stairs to visit me in my office. You get to the top of the stairs and you go to the left to my office. I've had people come up the stairs and look at me kind of funny. And I said, "Do you know the place is haunted?" And I go, "Well, that explains it." They had a feeling coming up the stairs. Something odd.
That's something odd.
And then they didn't even know the place was haunted. And then I told them that, and they're like, "Oh, yeah."
And now it makes sense to them.
To them.
Right. Now, is there any particular time of day when things are more or less active? Or obviously, most of the groups I imagine have been in here at night, so they're going to gather their data at that time. But from maybe the employer patron perspective, does lunchtime or dinner time or
Well, my own personal experience in the kitchen, that did not occur very late in the day.
Okay.
It was probably at the onset of dinner service.
Okay.
As far as other reported activity, typically it was reported when there were much fewer people in the building. However, as you'll find when you speak to Jack and Vicky, prior customer and prior employee,
right.
Their experiences included a busy night.
Okay.
With other numerous other customers witnessing what they witnessed. So I don't think it's isolated to any particular time of day or association with numbers.
Have any groups or any mediums identified anyone else other than who they think to be Miss Stacy? Has there been, a lot of times we'll get, especially in a building with of this age, and even newer, we'll get several spirits or several entities that actually occupy the building but are not aware that the others are there, because you had mentioned that on the second floor here, a lot more apparition sightings, the staircase to the women's room. Downstairs, maybe more mischievous things like silverware and being knocked off tables and whatnot. To me, that almost seems like two completely different entities, which is very possible. Has anybody identified anyone else by name or by history?
Recently, a medium group who actually met in this room.
Okay.
Broadcasting from. Survey is the right word, but they walked about each room.
Okay.
Sense.
Okay. Right. Well, what they meant.
Read. I guess
sure.
They read the
yep.
building.
Right. Yep.
The word maybe that they used. And they didn't refer to Mrs. Stacy. They didn't refer to the woman who was the frequent apparition.
Okay.
They actually referred to a man, unnamed man. They felt that quite possibly that even predated the issue.
Okay. Yep.
Could have even predated the private residence occupation of the building.
Okay.
So it may have gone back to, from what they were reading and the relationship of this person, or spirit, or being, whatever you refer to it as, in terms of their attachment and longing for this, was more of a steward. And they felt it was someone that had a very early relationship with it, closer to the time that it was built.
And they're still here to make sure, in their eyes, in their mind, that it's maintained. That's the gist of it, I would imagine.
Well, they told me that this person was watching over me.
Okay. And again, that's something that we run into at several of our other places that we do investigations. We have a mansion in Syracuse, which we frequent a lot, and the residents are still there, and they're there, from what our mediums have told us, for that same reason. They're there because they like to be there, and they want to make sure that this place stays active and open and functioning. So that's very similar.
Being that was the original purpose of this establishment, and that's what we returned it to.
Yes.
I think maybe in that sense there's an appreciation for us being the new occupants.
Absolutely. That's very true. Have you or anyone else heard any, we talked about maybe physical things happening. How about audio? How about audible voices or anything like that, or even physically being touched, or has anybody reported anything like that?
Yes. In fact, if she's still in the kitchen, I may have her speak to that.
Okay.
Having been physically touched is a report by Caroline, who's one of our cooks. Happened to her twice. I was standing next to her at one point where she responded as if someone had just grabbed her shoulder, over her shoulder, and we were standing there with her and nobody was there.
Sure.
She thought somebody was behind her.
Right.
Sorry, I forgot forgot the first part.
No, that's okay. If any, maybe voices or names or anything. If anybody's heard their name or heard.
No, I haven't heard anything about voices, although when we first opened, one of the most remarkable occurrences that was witnessed by myself, my wife, and another employee at the time, and our chef. We were sitting in the office, and all of a sudden, we heard a noise that sounded like the roof collapsed. It was so loud to us that I thought the building was
right. There was some problem. There was something. Yeah.
Now this was during pre-opening.
Okay.
We had men installing equipment. There were still contractors working on site. Well, I was so concerned. I jumped up, ran out of the office, ran down the stairs to where people were working, barged in and like, is everybody okay?
Yeah.
What's going on?
And they looked at you.
Well, maybe it didn't occur at this end of the building, so I ran to the other end of the building.
Right.
And they're like, is everything okay? You guys okay? They looked at me like, so whatever noise occurred was isolated. It was so loud to us. But it was isolated to our room. Yes. It seems that pronounced.
Now, we can definitely relate to this because we've had, it's so funny because you're the only person we've talked to that has had the same type of experience that we've had. About a year ago, we were at up at SUNY Oswego, and we were at Fort Ontario, and just outside Fort Ontario, there is a theater that SUNY Oswego used to use, and we had access to the theater overnight. It's supposed to be very haunted. Generally, anything connected to the fort is very haunted up there. Well, we were in the control room, and there's catwalks, and our medium who went out onto the catwalks by himself and the rest of us from the control room, and then all of a sudden we heard, and I know you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, this tremendous crash. It sounded like a giant pile of metal had just fallen down, and our first thought, we thought he fell off the catwalk. That was our first thought. We said, oh my God. So we yelled out, Ray, are you okay? Are you okay? What's going on? He said, I'm fine. What was that? And it was, we couldn't believe it. So we went out there, we looked around, nothing. But, I mean, there was four of us, and all four of us at the same time said, oh, my God, he fell off. And it was just this huge crash. So I know exactly the sound that you're talking about. And you're one of the only people that we talked to, I think, that can appreciate. He was shaking, yes. And he's never, he was shaking. So.
I mean, as significant as the noise was, and knowing what was going on in the building, you know what a stainless steel restaurant hood is for a kitchen?
Yeah, sure.
Ours is 14, 16 feet long.
Right.
Sorry, 6 guys plus to get this thing up and bolted to the ceiling. And that was the only thing I could possibly imagine that could make the sound that we heard is, did this thing come falling down and crashing to the floor? That's how loud it was. To us, nobody else should have been hurt.
Right, true. That's amazing. Yeah, we can definitely sympathize with that. Absolutely. with that. So if anyone else is available, if you do have the cook, if she's available, we'd love to talk to them. Before you go, though, I want you to, if you would, talk about some upcoming events here that people might be interested in and how they may be able to get a hold of you if they're interested in coming down here.
Sure. Well, we do a couple of things similar to what you gentlemen are experiencing tonight, doing investigation, touring the facility. Folks that choose to do that, being a restaurant, we encourage you to combine your trip to experience the Bullshead Inn.
Excellent.
Nice to hear it. And we can discount folks that are dining and investigating on the same night.
Right.
We can make that more affordable for them to do that. We do host meeting groups that want to have a luncheon, what have you. Most of the things we do right now are appointment only, and we are listed on the New York State Haunted History Trail website, and our website at Cobleskill.com. People can contact us and plan for events by appointment. We are planning to do some public tours.
Okay.
And I think by the end of July, those events will be listed up on our website. website.
Excellent.
So that we could take a look at those that are available and stop by when we're done. Also, another thing that we plan on doing later in the year is haunted dining.
Oh, okay.
So we will have a special menu.
Okay.
And typically it will be diners that sign up for this, make a reservation, whether it be 2 of you or 4 of you, how many people want to join in. Up to about 30 or 40 people in the large red dining room. And invite some of the past employees and customers to have their personal experience here right in the market, share stories, and then give a tour before or after the dinner. So
excellent.
It'll be a special format. That'll be something else that will be available.
Wonderful. Very awesome. We really appreciate you sitting with us and talking a little bit, and we're looking forward to investigating in about a half an hour, and everybody else that's listening is going to have to wait. So let's hear what we find.
So I can round up a couple of folks.
That'd be great. Absolutely. Great. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, so Chris is going to head out and grab a couple of employees or maybe some patrons that have had experiences here that would be willing to talk to us. So absolutely a very, very cool place. And again, I'm going to put in a plug for the food because Ken and I ate here and it was fantastic. So also very accommodating. And I'd like to mention, Chris had said that he was listed on the Haunted History Trail. We've done a number of places on the Haunted History Trail, including Palmyra. If you listened in last week, we had Bonnie from Palmyra on here. And a couple weeks ago, we had Chef Dominic from the Naples Hotel. These places on the Haunted History Trail are absolutely amazing. The owners are very considerate, very kind. The buildings themselves are historic and generally full of activity, quite honestly. So if you're in the New York area, if you pick up the Haunted History Trail map and check it out, there are a lot of great places, right, that you could take a look at on here and potentially investigate. So we are planned for our investigation just while we're waiting for another person to come up. We're going to start in the basement. We will then move up to the first floor where the number of apparitions have been seen. We'll head up to the second floor and the stairwell also where there's been a number of apparitions seen, and probably finish up in the attic. We'll get some static cams set up. We have the spirit box as always. We have the full spectrum regular digital camera as well as the K2 and the millimeter and motion sensors. So we are pretty well armed to the teeth tonight, even though it's just Ken and I. So we hope to bring you some great evidence by tomorrow or the day after. So as soon as we get somebody in here, we can continue to talk with them about their experiences at this restaurant and at the end. So I believe they're on their way in right now. Vicki? Hi, Vicki. How you doing? Come on over. Have a seat, please. Oh. Have a seat. Jack, would you please, Ken? That'd be great. Thank you. Oh. Hi, Vicki. How are you? Great.
Will is accompanying Vicki today.
Okay.
And Jack is here as a prior customer had some experiences. Vicki is our employee here that has some experience.
Fantastic. Can't wait to hear about them. All of them, definitely. Yep, I'll be able to pick up everybody just talking. I'm sorry, is this Bill or Phil? Bill, okay. All right. Bill, Jack, and Vicki. Okay. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to come up and talk to us. We've been through a whole lot of what's been going on with Chris and what has happened here, but now we'd like to hear some actual personal stories about what you've experienced here. So, Vicki, let's start with you. We'll work our way right down the row. So.
I used to work here.
Okay.
In the evening.
Okay.
Right? Every night after everybody left, we did a witness study. Checks and whatever, and we did everything, and had left wine, and all the lights would be out except for we were here.
Okay.
You know, and Betty would get a little nervous, and it would stop. We get back down. And all the waitresses that worked here that were talking Michelle, she would never come upstairs.
Okay.
She was the lady. She would go down to our floor, where the bar was.
Okay.
Because she was sick.
And that seems to be very similar to what Chris was just telling us about a lot of the activity from patrons they've noticed at the top of the stairwell here at the general area has been a lot of activity.
And one night, kids came up to the door. And then Michelle went up and said, turn up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they say it is. And he goes, well, what's that lady doing? Okay. But there was nobody
But
here.
there was nobody here. So that's...
He goes, she's up there with a baby. She has a baby.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Now, about how long ago was this?
We bought it in 2013.
Okay, so about 5 years ago or so. Okay. Now, Jack, how about you? Your experiences?
Quite a number. Some of them were simply people who I have known and respected. I've been with the associate.
Okay.
So these are people like a librarian, a former professor of our tourism program.
So these are people with some substance, with some... Sure, absolutely.
So they weren't pulling their leg.
Right, exactly.
So I could pass on any number of anecdotal stories. Secondary, I've had 2 personal experiences.
Okay.
I don't know how much time you've got.
No, go ahead. Go. Absolutely.
I'll give you the first one.
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
Just so the speaking goes. I write, in the past I've written a number of mystery dinner events.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Go to a local restaurant.
Sure.
5-chapter mystery dinner, accompanied by a 5-course dinner. It was fun.
Okay.
So, a local group. And so someone said, Jack, you should write something about the bull's head.
Right.
We do a seance. I said, sure. I'll put something together. I had a local group of friends who into all of these things. They just put them all.
Right.
And from restaurant to restaurant. So this particular announced to my group of friends that there was going to be a seance dinner at the Bull's Head. I'd gone down to Key West for a time before that.
Okay.
And they had a hokey little thing down there.
Sure.
Seance
Right.
Key West, and so I decided to take part in it. I was an amateur magician in my early years, very early.
Right.
And so it wasn't too difficult to see through the trickery.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
All that back.
Right.
Fold that into the Bull's Head seance.
Right.
And so I did. And I had probably 20, 25 who regularly take part in these dinners of mine, these mystery dinners. But I pulled aside 4 or 5 of them. And I said, look, this is going to be an entertainment. This is fun.
Right.
So we have to have some supernatural experiences, and you are my cast.
Right.
we rehearsed ahead of time.
Okay.
Somebody was going to be possessed by Mr. Stacy. The pretend goes to the Bull's Head. There was a story circulating that the colonial era installed its 3rd Bull's Head on the site. So earlier versions of the Bull's Head local Native American had been brutally slaughtered by a colonist.
Right.
I had a student who was very theatrical.
Right.
So he was going to be possessed by the Indians.
Okay.
And so he practiced speaking in tongues. He sounded like he made something out of it. And so it went on and on like this. And Youngs, who was then the owner, was sort of in on it. We had a tape recording of just what I call them, scary sounds, but not Halloween type scary sounds, not banging chains and so forth. Just little whispers like a breeze or a tinkle.
Sure.
And we had the whole thing on tape, and the tape was well hidden. Nobody could see it. And there was no... He was going to sneak up after we started it, plug it in his office. The tape would simply make noise.
Right.
Get around.
Yeah.
had ping pong balls hanging from beds.
Right.
If well, nobody's looking.
Right.
The balls move.
Right.
In case spirits are in the room.
Why?
All this hokey stuff.
Well, I have a feeling this is going to take a very unexpected turn on you.
So we had 4 or 5 people in on it. Don't tell anybody else.
No.
I sent out the usual invitations to the dinner to my usual.
Mm-hmm.
I gave Bob Young, the owner of the Bullshead, a copy of it so he would know what to do.
Right.
But the night came. I hadn't had many of my friends reserved with me personally, but we had 20 people signed up to the dinner, so I figured, well, they had somebody called in directly in their reservation. So we came in that night in advance and walked into what's now the room on the left as you come in the front door. And there were a lot of people there. I didn't know many of them. There were my cast of 4 or 5.
Right.
And then 3 or 4 others that I did know, but mostly a room full of strangers. And what I realized was Bob had duplicated the invitation, put a stack of them out on the table in the lobby, and a group of folks much like you had picked up on the invitation and come for dinner. So we're going around the room, introducing ourselves, and I mean, the foots. So we had to go ahead with it. I said, "Oh, I'm Professor Ingalls."
Right.
James Angel, Flores, who are my cast members, so on, and these other people. I did not know people in long black robes, pretty hair, all kinds of things. And as it turned out, there's a group of mediums in this county whom I had never met or heard of before, and they were there. Well, there was a collective, oh my God, that circulated among the 4 or 5 of us. So what are we in for now? Nevertheless, started it. I would also point out there was a couple who they were friends of mine. They operated a restaurant. The restaurant is still there. They're no longer there. It's as you go west on Route 7 before the restaurant. And they were here that night as well. So we started the seance, and in a real seance, you're supposed to hold hands. You can't hold hands and eat dinner. So I put a big rope around the table. We all held onto the rope while eating. And the tape played, and Stacy possessed Jermaine Joel, and the Indian appeared and spoke in tongues, and the whole thing. And all the time, I'm thinking, these 4 people that came for a serious. Right. What are they thinking? Well, the dinner stopped twice, respectively. One of the gentlemen, who was not part of my group, he was one of the local mediums. Excuse me, Jack, but put in the corner. At that time, looking in the corner, pointed you toward the men's room. There was a small, tiny little room in the far corner of this floor, actually. There. And we all kind of looked, we saw absolutely nothing. Right. And he described a man, I guess I'll call it colonial garb, tall leather boots, kind of a ruffled, drawing a long clay pipe, standing in the corner. He described him to us. Right. Several people saw him. Most of my friends. Right. But they saw him. So we continued. One of my friends, who my restaurant owners, looked over at him, holding onto the rope. Right. Heavy into the seance. Sure. Right. And these figures were running at 6 and child. It was a little strange. He wasn't part of my cast. Right. And so I asked him, John, what's the problem? Why are you crying, John? Put up. And he flew down the stairs. He didn't go back. So it up again.
Right.
The food came, the balloons came,
right.
balls in the back
right.
the tape played, I just strange little sounds. And 2 or 3 times during the course of the rest of the evening, I heard John trying to come back up the stairs. Not like he was wrestling with somebody, and he never appeared. 2 or 3, 4 times this went on.
Wow.
So when it was over, I began by apologizing to the people who were taking this seriously.
Right.
I certainly wasn't. So I'm so sorry. So you came here for a serious study,
right.
and we just threw this carnival act at you. Oh, no.
Yeah.
He said, while you were talking, he said, we saw, he pointed to one of our friends. Over. Said, we saw a lady standing behind her all the time. I forget what the role was
right.
in the little play. But there was no plan for there to be a lady standing behind her.
Right.
They saw. Now, the apparition always seems to be described pretty much the same. An elderly lady, long,
sure, right.
Granny collar, hair, all that kind of stuff. Asked my friend John later, I said, John, what was this? Running downstairs. Why didn't you come back up and join us? He said, Jack, every time I tried to come back up those stairs, something held me back. Something pushed me back, and I tried about 3 times, and finally just gave up trying to come up the stairs.
Wow.
That's my one personal experience.
Yeah.
Personal experience number 2 was, as a professor at the college, a number of student and industry events here at the place.
Mm-hmm.
This particular night, I had 10 of my better students, 10 representatives of companies, places students with.
Right.
And we were down in the room that's fireplace.
Yeah. Yep. Sure.
And things are going really well. The dinner was good. Student industry.
Mm-hmm.
They just didn't need me.
Right.
Happened to be at a long table. It was almost like last supper.
Yeah.
One stop. By the fireplace, the table was set up for the servers to stack dishes. Everything's going fine. They didn't need me. Students in the industry, people were conversing. The waitress server that night was a woman who had been here.
Okay.
Just a professional.
Right.
Server.
Right.
She knew exactly what she was doing. So she said, I have to clear away the dishes. So they had large trays downstairs. They still have them. They still use them. And she put it on the table. It was a solid, secure table. Right? 30 dishes. When you stack them up, stack them pretty high stack.
Right.
The dishes. And what happened? Nobody, I don't think anybody saw this with me because I wasn't looking for a job.
Sure, right. Exactly.
I'm simply looking at the fireplace, the table's in front of the fireplace, the trays on top of the table, and the dishes are stacked up.
Mm-hmm.
And we just stepped away for a moment. No one was paying any attention. The table did not collapse. There was no explanation.
Right.
I saw the tray lift up on one end. All the dishes go crashing to the ground.
Wow.
And the tray went back down to its place. And everybody simply thought that the server had
right.
wasn't the case at all. So those are my 2.
That seems to be a very common theme with things Ken and I were discussing. With things lifting up.
That's where quite a bit of it.
Right. Right. Yep.
And they were asking me about stories, so I was telling them what I knew.
Right.
So they said, would you take our picture? So I gave his camera.
Right.
And the ones that were sitting here stood behind those. So I took their picture, and I took another one. I gave that. I was running their food out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Camera, the picture, and there they all were. It's this big white.
Really?
Behind them.
Wow. That was. That is amazing. We have about 15 minutes. Bill, do you have a story?
I do not.
You do. Oh, okay. I didn't know if you were.
I've never had an experience.
Okay.
Plus, you're not really right. It's all kind of. I really am kind of a non-believer.
Okay. Okay.
As I was before I won the bullseye.
That's absolutely.
But this is Caroline. I mentioned she
Yes.
had an experience
In the kitchen.
Yes.
As Caroline's joining us. She is a chef in the kitchen here at the Bull's Head Inn. So, Caroline, if you'd like
Would it
to,
help if she came closer?
as long as she speaks loud, she'll be okay.
Quite well.
That's fine. I can hear you, no problem.
Actually, one evening, Chris, Chef Corey, and myself were standing on the back stairs. Chris was at the bottom of the stairs, and I thought Chef had grabbed the exact jacket right in the middle of the jacket, joking around, and pulled on it.
Right.
And I was like, stop pulling on my jacket. And he looked at Chris, and he was like, we touched you.
Right.
So, just like that, like, and that's a very specific, like, feeling.
Sure it is.
It's not something that you can.
Well, it's not a tap. It's a pull. So.
Right. So the middle of my jacket
Right.
was full. And the only other time that I had a physical was when, before I had closed with the last owner, a
Okay.
girlfriend of mine said, you've got to come, check it out, we'll go to the pub and have a burger.
Right.
And on the way down the side stairs, she was in front of me. I was patted on the back, on the shoulder, like somebody had walked in behind me and was like, hey, I'm here too.
Right.
And I was like, and then I turned back around and I said, so this place is haunted, huh? And she just giggled. She was like, already? And I was like, yeah.
And these are the same stairs where you had your jacket pulled?
No.
This is different. Okay.
The stairs where I was tapped on the shoulder are the side stairs that led to the basement.
Okay.
They are out. You came from outside the building in.
Okay.
I'm here quite a bit by myself early in the morning or whatever. You hear little things, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard making coffee in the morning. I've heard somebody pick up the tea box. It's a wooden tea box at the service station. And I turned thinking somebody walked in behind me, and I was like, oh, no, there's that again. You know?
Yeah.
It is definitely very active.
It is. And we were speaking with Chris earlier, and I always like to reiterate this, especially after stories, personal stories, that there's nothing negative that anybody has reported. There's nothing dangerous or quote-unquote evil or anything like that. And that, I think it's always very important to note, especially we do a lot of historic locations, a lot of places on the Haunted History Trail, and again, I'll say it again and again and again, these places are, yes, they're haunted from what we have, or, well, I should say there's activity in these places. A lot of energy and a lot of activity in all these places, but never have we come across anything negative, and that pertains to here as well. I mean, stuff being tipped off of a tray or getting tugged on your jacket. These are what we were talking about earlier, is mischievous type things, trying to get your attention, trying to let you know that we're here. Hey, take a look at me, even though they don't realize you can't see them. You know, that kind of thing. Vicki, were you a believer in any of this before you had your experience here? You do? Okay. And you believed in that prior to working here as well. And you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but have you had any other personal experiences outside of this building? Okay. Yeah.
When he told me to look, I looked.
And you didn't see him, sure.
But,
yeah.
You know.
Now, Jack, how about you? Are you now on the fence?
I grew up in Indiana. We don't have.
No ghosts in Indiana. That's good.
But I've been here 50 years, I guess.
Okay.
And I've been at the Bull's Head since 1966.
Right. Okay.
I can give you a little bit of a time reference.
Okay.
No one talked about ghosts at the Bull's Head until the downstairs club.
Okay. This is what I was asking Chris about. Okay. That doesn't surprise me.
I don't quite know why that is, but it may not be related at all.
Right.
But 1960s, early 70s, the Bull's Head was
right.
related.
And again, that's an era where I think if you walked around professing something like that, you would be labeled as crazy, for lack of a better term. So I don't think that was that doesn't surprise me that wasn't put out there.
It may just be coincidental, but yes, it's weird.
Right.
It started with they started.
Sure. Yeah.
Guess what? Any other experiences like that? I mean, used to take a house in Cape Cod.
Okay.
Yeah, quite a while. It was like old. I know. It was an old house.
Okay.
And there were true stories. One of the previous owners hung himself in the barn.
Sure.
So yeah, I did. We had a number of. I guess they had really scary experiences.
They did. Right. Right.
And so, moved around.
Being moved
Somebody
around.
up there at the time.
Exactly.
Bathroom one time. Hours in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
The best was asleep.
Right.
And I was turning.
His turn.
That type of.
Sure.
So I suppose that any number of stories here, we had time, I could leave them to.
Yeah.
So I trust and experiences.
Yeah.
Saw things.
Well, and I think that's a very significant part of it, is that these are stories coming from people that you do know, that you know well, and that you trust. It's not just some guy you're sitting next to at the bar one night who decides to tell you the story.
I'll give you one story that doesn't make any sense at all.
Go ahead. We love that kind of stuff.
Sorry, the biscuit story? No, that's another one where their bread was thrown across the room. It's put inside of the head. When it first opened, opened and several times. There was hanging in the downstairs an old telephone.
Okay.
One of the crank telephones like you see in the Western. Didn't even have the earpiece.
Right.
It was just the telephone hanging full like a picture. That's all that it was.
Right.
So the last sale, I think somebody.
Sure.
It wasn't wired. It wasn't a working telephone. It didn't even have all the parts there.
Right.
The staff used to sit in the lobby, hold napkins for the first customer to arrive. And I was sitting there one night, holding napkins. The phone rang, and any number of people swore to that.
Right. There was that.
But they couldn't answer it.
Right, because it's not hooked up to anything. Wow. Yeah. That is amazing. That is amazing. I do need to start wrapping everything up, but I appreciate you very much coming up and telling us stories. So we got to get to investigating pretty soon and see if we can get anything here. So, but definitely, thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate your time. So, thank you, Bill. Hey, nice to meet you too. That?
So when they started
Which is my name. Yep. Thank you very. Have a good night, folks. Very cool. Absolutely, and there's really nothing better than getting firsthand stories like that, I would say. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely.
Yep. And there is, like Jack was saying, there are actually many more stories that go along with this. There are this places that are written up in a number of different books, and there's a number of different stories about it. So, it is a great place, and it is full of history and full of activity, without a doubt. So we are going to wrap up just a couple minutes early tonight. In about 5 minutes, you can join April and Carrie on the next show. They may even come on a little bit earlier than that. I'm not too sure. We do need to get up and running with our investigation. We have a 3-hour investigation ahead of us here, then a 2-hour drive home. So we do have quite a hike ahead of us. But please look for pictures on our Shadow Travels Facebook page, as well as the Facebook page for Syracuse Area Paranormal. You can also check out this show again if you want to listen to it again. Okay, we'll have it up for you tomorrow or Thursday, on the page to listen again. So thank you very much, everybody, for listening, and look forward to speaking with you next week on the show. Have a good night.
Junior Investigating Paranormal Society, first national paranormal organization created and ran by teens. Investigating for over 6 years, the team gives you a unique perspective on investigating the paranormal. They are now offering courses online or in person on investigating and developing your mediumship skills. For more information, contact John Covey at 540-560-9190 or email them at jips.pa@gmail.com. Participants must be 13 or older with parental consent.
Well, hey everybody, this is April and Carrie with Freaks and Geeks, and we are on episode 15. Carrie, you with me? Carrie, are you there? Hey Carrie, can you hear me?
Hey, April.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. I never know whether people can hear me or not. I don't know. But
I'm muted, but it was spinning.
Okay. Well, cool. Well, welcome everyone to the 15th episode of Freaks and Geeks. Carrie, I don't know about you, but I honestly never thought we would make it this far.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited. I mean, it's a big achievement.
I feel like a love song from the 70s right now. So, this episode of Freaks and Geeks is going to be a little bit different. In the past, we've done some kind of serious topics, but mostly we try to keep it as lighthearted as possible. I think this one's going to be pretty difficult for all of us, really, and maybe even difficult for the listeners too. But it's something that we really wanted to tackle, that you and I both felt pretty passionately about, and that we know that there is quite a lack of communication when it comes to the topic of suicide, especially suicide in the paranormal. And you and I wanted so much to go ahead and just try and offer people help out there, because we've been approached in the past for help, and you and I have gone through our own struggles with that kind of stuff. So hopefully the people out there will find this enlightening, and hopefully the people out there that need it will be able to get the support that they need, and we can help point some people in the right directions, that kind of thing. So without further ado, Carrie, I would like to ask you the same question I ask you every single week, because it's the best way to kick this thing off. How was your week?
It was pretty good. My oldest daughter, Aslan, turned 10 last Thursday, so very exciting, in the double digits now.
Yep, happy birthday, Aslan. That's awesome.
Yeah, it feels kind of crazy to be the parent of a 10-year-old, but
oh my gosh, yeah, a decade.
A decade. I know. So Saturday we went to Dave's Comics, to their closing sale, and got a lot of good stuff. So we did that.
That's pretty awesome. Oh God. Well, I went to a comic book store too. A handful of times actually over the last week, but so here at Freaks and Geeks, we talk a lot about the freaky stuff. Usually when we say freaks, we mean frequencies, because, we're pretty geeky, which is why we're also geeks.
Because science.
So, huh?
Because
science, right, because science, exactly. So we're all trying to be paranormal wizards here, or paranormal scientists. I'm trying to be, the doctor here. But because of my geekiness, I may or may not have gotten thrown headlong into Pokemon Go. Mm-hmm. So I know I'm among friends here, so nobody judge me. I am absolutely obsessed with Pokemon Go. I have just played the crap out of it since sleep is at a minimum right now. I've played the crap out of it since it was launched. So excited. Also, I cannot wait for this weekend, because Ghostbusters comes out, and I know there's a lot of haterade about Ghostbusters and about how it's got this all-female cast and blah 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 blah, and they're trying too hard, which most of those are my thoughts. So, but I'm still really excited about it, because I think that at the very least it'll kind of put the paranormal back into popular culture. Not that it isn't right now, but it's kind of this obscure, like, weird back alley of popular culture. It's like, oh yeah, those guys are super weird. They're like the Magic the Gathering people. So being able to have Ghostbusters and have it be quite possibly a blockbuster success, not only will it bring more people to the field that might be a little bit interested in it, that kind of thing, but it's also going to do wonders for us to be able to get into locations, that kind of stuff, because they're going to be like, oh yeah, I saw the movie Ghostbusters, you know, like, oh, you guys must be funny too, you guys must be jokesters too, yeah, we'll definitely let you in there. And those that need to see the serious side of us will definitely see that too. So I just think that anything positive about the paranormal is going to open a door, and I just can't be too mad about it. So I'm super excited to go see it. Even more so because, Chris is not going to listen to this because he's playing hockey right now, so I feel like I'm safe. But he has planned out this whole date night on Saturday. I don't have a babysitter yet, so cross your fingers that I'm able to get one, but he's planned out this crazy date night where we're going to the restaurant that we had our first date at, and we're going to go see Ghostbusters, which I've been looking forward to for months. And I don't know, he's done more planning for this date than I've ever seen him do before for any date. So I don't know what's going on there, but we'll see. We shall see.
Well, that's pretty exciting. I'm pretty excited to see Ghostbusters too. I've watched, the original and the sequel with Aslan and Kaylee, and Kaylee is hyped to see the girls' Ghostbusters. I
can't even wait. That's so exciting. Is she like John Cena hyped or just normal level hyped?
Maybe like a notch below John Cena hyped because she wasn't screaming it at me. But she's pretty excited.
Well, that's exciting. Well, it's exciting that she's excited to go see Ghostbusters because it's something that you guys can share. And it might even be a great way to kind of broach the conversation about some of the stuff that you do. I don't know how much Aslan and Kaylee know about this kind of stuff, but Jane knows nothing. And she won't see Ghostbusters for a while, but when she does, that'll be probably how I tell her that her mother is a Ghostbuster.
Well, they've known since we started, and they're into it. They want to go. They ask me rather often when they can go, and I tell them, when they're older, and so they're into it.
That's super exciting. I can't wait to be able to take the girls on ghost hunts together. We could go on cross-country ghost hunts.
Yes.
The 5 of us. It'd be fantastic.
I mean, Kaylee is prepared. When I had your K2 for 6 months after an investigation, she was investigating the house. She found the spot in the kitchen cabinets where it lights up to red, but there is no wiring in there. I don't know why it does it. So she is convinced that there's a ghost in the kitchen cabinet.
Oh, man. That's crazy. That's awesome, though. That's really cool.
Yeah, she's ready to go.
So she wants to dig in the walls? You should let her dig in the walls.
Let's make it crazy.
All right. Well, are we ready to embark on our topic?
Yes.
Okay. Well, so again, for those that just tuned in, our topic tonight is going to be suicide and the paranormal. So we're going to try and treat this subject as sensitively as possible. And we do have, Carrie and I have both researched and gotten a whole host of organizations out there that are out there for support for people that are either have lost a loved one due to suicide or are suffering with depression themselves and maybe questioning their time here. So we've got all those resources available. Don't be afraid to reach out to us. Our email address, as always, is freaksandgeeks@gmail.com. Feel free to call in if you'd like to ask any questions. We're actually going to be joined tonight by Pat Bussard, who is just phenomenal. She is a terrific person. She's also a very gifted psychic medium. She's a photographer. She's an author. I've got actually a few things here. She is the creator and the host of something called Hearts and Spirit that we talk about a lot here on the Vibe Radio Network. And to be honest, I don't think I knew what it was when it came around. And now that I've looked into it and now that I've read more and more about it, because it was so perfect for this particular subject, the more that I've read about it, now I'm like, damn, I can't believe we missed that. Like, it would have been so fantastic to go. And so, like, I'm reading on the site right now, it says featuring experts on bereavement, afterlife communication, death cognizance, spirituality, and so much more. It was in a beautiful place. It was in the Nickerson Sneed House. It's an antebellum mansion. It's just absolutely beautiful. It's at Glade Springs, Virginia. So it was out there in the boonies, but it would have been well worth it. And something that I think that is really key, that is on the Hearts and Spirit Conference website, the quote up at the top says, love has no age, no limit, and no death, which I think is just really kind of poignant for this evening. It doesn't, just because someone has passed doesn't mean that those emotions and those things and the connections to their mortal coil has actually ceased. So this is just a great topic. She's also a paranormal investigator, so she's been able to help out a lot. And Carrie and I have both gotten readings from her, and she's very. What I really love is that she's not going to tell you the thing that you want to hear. But she definitely will tell you what you need to know, which is great. Really good. And she's a Virginia Tech. She's been to Virginia Tech, so she's a Virginia Tech alum in some respects. So that's fantastic. Like, I'm definitely down for that because I'm a Hokie, so it's what it is. I wanted to go ahead and get into a couple of, before she comes on, I think she's coming on here in about 5 minutes or so. Before she does, though, I kind of wanted to get into a couple of statistics. Carrie and I both kind of picked out some organizations that meant a lot to us personally, and one of the ones that I really key into and that I spend a lot of money and a lot of charity, do a lot of charity work for, is something called Stop 22. I want to talk about that for just a second. So every single day, there's 22 veterans that commit suicide, and that's just far too many. Obviously, I'm a veteran myself, so that's kind of what I am biased enough to kind of key into. I've lost a lot of friends to suicide, a lot of veteran friends to suicide specifically, and, I've even had loved ones that are very close to me that have tried to commit suicide as well, based off of things that have happened to them during their service, which is just, to me, a tragedy, absolute tragedy that shouldn't happen to anyone. And by virtue of the things that I do, it's I know it's a hard life, and we've all lost people on the floor. So I want to make sure that we put that out there. Stop 22. I'm going to make sure the contact information, the websites, the phone numbers, everything are going to be on the Freaks and Geeks Facebook page. So go ahead and give us a like, and you can download all that information, everything that we have. Like I said, again, don't be afraid to reach out to us there. So that statistic there, that 22 veterans every single day, that is absolutely just, that's insane. So here's some other facts that are also just as insane. The Centers for Disease Control in 2014 put out a bunch of stats, and there's 42,773 deaths by suicide in the United States every year. Suicide is the 10th leading cause of death, and homicide ranks the 17th. It is the second leading cause of death for 15 to 24-year-olds. Suicide, the suicide rates decreased from 1990 to 2000 from 12.5 suicides per 100,000 to 10.4 per 100,000. But over the past decade, the rate has again increased to 21.1 per 100,000. Every day, approximately 105 Americans die by suicide. There is one death by suicide in the U.S. every 12.3 minutes. Depression affects 20 to 25% of Americans ages 18 plus in a given year. Suicide takes the lives of over 38,000 Americans every year. Only half of all Americans experiencing an episode of major depression receive treatment. 80 to 90% of adolescents that seek treatment for depression are treated successfully using therapy and or medication. An estimated 250,000 people each year become suicide survivors. There is one suicide for every estimated 25 suicide attempts. There is one suicide for every estimated 4 suicide attempts in the elderly. Suicide among males is 4 times higher than among females. Male deaths represent 79% of all U.S. suicides. Firearms are the most commonly used method of suicide among males. That's 51%. Access to firearms is associated with a significantly increased risk of suicide. Females are more likely than males to have suicidal thoughts. Females experience depression at roughly 2 times the rate of men. Females attempt suicide 3 times as often as males. Poisoning is the most common method of suicide for females. 1 in 100,000 children ages 10 to 14 die of suicide each year. 7 in 100,000 youth ages 15 to 19 die by suicide each year. 12.7 in 100,000 adults ages 20 to 24 die by suicide each year. The prevalence of suicidal thoughts, suicidal planning, and suicide attempts is significantly higher among adults aged 18 to 29 than among adults aged 30 plus. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for 15 to 24-year-old Americans. Suicide is the 4th leading cause of death for adults ages 18 to 65. The highest increase in suicide is in males over 50, 30 per 100,000. Suicide rates for females are highest among those aged 45 to 54, or 9 per 100,000. Suicide rates for males are highest among those aged 75 or higher. That's 36 per 100,000. Suicide rates among the elderly are the highest for those who are divorced or widowed. That's crazy, huh? That's absolutely nuts to think that every 12.3 minutes there is a death by suicide.
So that means in the course of our show, 5 suicides will occur.
Oh, that hurts me. That hurts me so bad. That's so the statistics that I got were off of the Suicide Awareness and Voices of Education. So it's called SAVE. It's yellow ribbons. And we're going to go ahead and hook you guys up with the site for that. They have a lot of resources there for people that are depressed or people that are contemplating suicidal thoughts, that kind of thing. So even people that are near people that are having suicidal thoughts, the whole fact sheet on some things that you can do when someone close to you is contemplating suicide. So for those that are out there that are just kind of standing on the wayside, please know that there are things that you can do too. There are resources for you as well. If you are left behind after a suicide and you're having lots of thoughts, then please go ahead and check out some of these resources. There are tons and tons of resources for family members and that kind of thing. And I think that's something that people don't really realize, is that there are resources, there is support, there is advocacy for the loved ones that are kind of left with the wake. So, Carrie, do you have any additional facts or anything like that you want to talk about?
Just that there is some genetic research being done to see whether genes play a role in whether people are more or less resilient to loss and hardships. The risk factor does increase if you've had family members commit suicide.
Yeah, that's true. All right. Are you ready to go ahead and bring Pat on real quick?
Yep.
Sweet. All right, let's bring her in. I'm going to assume that she's this caller. Hey, Pat, it's April. Are you on?
I am. Thank you for having me.
Oh, hey, Pat. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. We know it's a somber topic, but it's something that's really important.
I will tell you that listening to the statistics, and I may have missed a little of the beginning because I waited to call in a little bit into your introduction. But one of the areas too that there's such a high rate of suicide, of course, is among the mentally ill, especially with those with bipolar. It's 25 to 50% of all people with bipolar have at least attempted suicide, and the statistic, from my understanding, is comparable with those with schizophrenia. So it truly is tragic.
Absolutely. It's just so devastating to think about something like that. It's those facts and those figures kind of bring it home and really describe something that, if you haven't close to that kind of stuff before, if you haven't been, had to deal with suicide, then you just really don't kind of think about it. You don't really realize how many people it affects and how many people out there are suffering and either getting help or not getting help at all, which is, terrible.
It's obviously a national, and if you look at other statistics, an international crisis. And, I can only hope that all of those who need help are able to find it. I think that the one thing that many suicides do, of course, is they get into the depressive stage. And let me tell your audience, I have a master's, but it's not a master's degree, but it is not in counseling. This is just my research and then my experience, having a family member who has these sorts of issues. You really do want to delve into as much of the literature as you can. And yes, it's definitely a crisis in America in particular. And when they get to the depressive state, one of the things you do, of course, is you withdraw from society. So you're not reaching out for the help that you need at that point. You become insulated and literally are living with the demons that put you there. And I don't mean that literally, people, please. But the demons, the problems, sometimes simply the mental illness that builds this wall around you and cuts you off from reaching out to those who could help you.
That's a really good way of describing it. The way that I always talk to Mike's husband, Don, I always told him that it was like being in the bottom of a well and you can't climb out of it. No matter how hard you try, no matter how differently you want to think, and you want to think differently, you really want to be better, and you really want to change, and you really want to have different thoughts, and you really want all these things, but at the end of the day, you still find yourself in that damn well, and you just can't get out of it. You can't see anything around you.
Right, except the pain that you feel. I have a daughter who is bipolar, and having lived vicariously through her pain, and of course being a mother, even if you're not a natural empath, believe me, this is the one time that you were feeling someone else's pain. And to watch her go through these dark times in her life, she was just very, very lucky that she had such a good support group, of family and friends around her who really reached out and paid attention to, the times in her life when she was in that very, very dark place. It's almost like a prison. It's like somebody has locked someone in this darkness, and the key is not inside the cage, but outside the cage. And so it's almost like that. That's how difficult it is for them sometimes to break out, if you will. So you have to be there or have that support group or reach out so that somebody else can pick up that key and open the door.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So that's really important to touch on, is that, you need to try and draw on those external sources of comfort and that kind of thing. And even if you feel like you don't have them, even if for a lot of people, they think maybe it's embarrassing to admit, or they're a little bit too shy to admit that they're having these feelings, or, they don't want to they don't want to be a burden to their loved ones. They don't want to reach out because they think that that either the people can't help them, number one, or that they'll be ridiculed or they'll be looked down on because they're having this weakness. But it's not a weakness. That's not it at all. Everybody goes through stuff like this. And, you have to reach out. And I'm so glad that she was able to kind of draw on the people around her. That's so fortuitous. It's really great.
Yes, and, unfortunately, not everyone has that support group. And,
exactly.
When you're in depression, sometimes you have to reach out. Now, I don't know, myself, I will tell you, as I said, vicariously, I have lived through this. I've seen the darkness, but I have not lived that darkness. And I don't want to sound like I'm a Pollyanna, because I'm not. I'm very much a realist. But I've seen that pain, and I know that personally I have not experienced it. And we have something in society, and it has carried through the millennia, and it's the terror of being the other. The other is the one that is ostracized by society. And when we talk about mental illness, there still is, to this day, some, unfortunately, some negative attributes that society assigns to people who have a mental illness of any kind. And so, especially in America, where everything is cookie cutter. I mean, I'm seeing 19-year-old girls getting lip fillers so that they can look like one of the Kardashians. Stamp, and I'm saying stamp as in cookie cutter. This whole idea of fitting in, it's always been with us. In 1692, you did not want to be goody-good, living on the edge of town without a man to speak for you, who was thought to be a little bit eccentric because she was the other. And so when the Salem witchcraft trials came into fruition, and you had, Anne Proctor pointing the finger at this poor old woman whom, was, quote, the other, it was a matter of life and death. And, of course, Goody Good was one of the ones that went to trial. And if you go to the University of Virginia, they actually have the trial files, that have been transcribed on file there through the library, and you can actually read some of that and listen to how these women were hounded in the court and how uneducated and how fearful they were. But the way they ended up there was that they were the other. And so, anything that sets people apart, there's an underlying tone of terror with it, in a sense, in that it often throughout history meant that, it could mean your demise. And so families would hide their mentally ill people. They would put them in the attic. They would, if they were well-to-do, they would send them off to a sanitarium. This whole idea of hiding someone because they had a mental illness, or because, they used to call it, they would have the vapors and they would pass out. And they would often use, vapors as a code for depression. It's one of the things that the Victorians would call it. And so if you had the vapors and you had a well-to-do family, they could assign you or send you somewhere where they wouldn't have to address you at the dinner table. So all of this, it's almost like sometimes in our history we have an echo of things. And even today, with as broad-minded as many people are and as understanding through education over, decades, there's still this echo of that idea of being the other. And so you said, it's difficult for some people to reach out. And it is, because that echo still lingers.
That's terrible.
Mm-hmm.
That's absolutely terrible.
But now I will tell you, for one of the things that I get as a psychic medium is I get a lot of people who have had suicides in the family, and they're very, very fearful of what has happened to their loved one in the spiritual realm. And I want you to know that it has been my experience that now you have to understand, again, a disclaimer, I am not trying to change anybody's religious beliefs. Or spiritual beliefs. I am going to simply state this from my experience. This is my experience. That we all go to the same place. I call it the other world. And we are reborn, and we all know that is reincarnation. And in each lifetime, we collect either good or bad energy as to what we put into this lifetime. And have we found our path in this lifetime? Are we doing good works? Et cetera, et cetera. I'm not saying everyone has to be a saint in every lifetime, but I'm certainly saying that if we're cruel to people, if we judge people, if we have an inclination to go with our darker self, then during that lifetime, we are collecting negative energy that is going to have to be balanced. And that balance occurs in the universe whenever we cross over and we live lifetimes. We have a chance to make things right. In ancient, Egyptian beliefs, they believed that when a person died, that Anubis held the balance, and they would put the soul on one side and there was a feather on the other. In order to enter into the next lifetime, your soul had to be lighter than a feather. In other words, you could not bring a lot of negative, heavy energy with you in order to be able to go on to the afterlife. And as we all know, the Egyptians were all about the afterlife. So even there, we had this concept of universal energy and balancing that energy. And so I want your listeners to know that one of the things I get is, that whole question of what happens to my loved ones after death if they have had or have committed suicide. In my experience, everyone goes to the same place. We go there for a period of time. We can cross over when we need to, when our people who we have left on this earth, family and friends, may call to us, we can cross over. And that's why often we feel someone with us that we, like a mother or a grandmother that we know has crossed over, and we feel that energy because they are back with us. We could be very depressed at that moment. We could be hurt. We could simply be lonely for them. But we have the ability, like a light, to draw that energy to us. And when it is our time to cross over, if those spirits have decided to stay in the spiritual realm, and there's something called a soul group, and that's where we travel through lifetimes with a group of other souls. So they may wait for you to cross over, and that's when we have so many reports of near-death experiences where people on their deathbed have seen their loved ones and actually connect and communicate with them before they join them on the other side.
That is a really interesting concept. I'm just...
I don't believe in, from what I've seen, there's not some sort of punitive action that the universal energy, that God says, all right, this particular soul could not bear the horrors and the burdens of this lifetime for them. They were unable to do that. And so they chose to cross over at a certain time. It has not been my experience as a psychic medium that these souls are punished in a spiritual way for having made that decision.
Right. So there's actually, I did some research, I did a lot of research for this show, but there were two people's perspectives that I kind of wanted to give that I thought were really good. One is Dr. George G. Ritchie. He was a medical doctor, and he held positions as the president of the Richmond Academy of General Practice. He was chairman of the Department of Psychiatry of Towers Hospital. He was the founder and president of the Universal. He did that for about 20 years. He also was a private psychiatrist, and he also headed up the Department of Psychiatry at Northeast Alabama Regional Medical Center. So he was a very learned man. He had a near-death experience, and from that, he had all of these visions, and he had this connection through time and space that he wrote about. And he actually wrote a book. And so in his book, he actually dealt with people that commit suicide. He kind of gave his take on it, and he said that there's 3 different classifications for people that commit suicide. So this is his take. So he said the first classification are those who kill themselves in order to hurt someone, who kill themselves out of hatred for someone else. According to Richie, these people haunt the living by being aware of every horrible consequence their suicide had on others. So that's kind of like that retribution. It's kind of a passive retribution, but it still is. The second classification are those who, because of mental illness, confusion, or terminal illness, take their own life. Richie states that these people are allowed many opportunities from God to grow in love, just as any other person who had not committed suicide. In other words, there are no negative consequences for them. Then the third classification are those who kill themselves from drug, alcohol, or any other addiction. According to Richie, these people can become stuck in limbo, trying in vain to set aside their addiction until eventually something frees them. This condition is often called an earthbound condition. So that was his take. And then I also got Erin Pavlina. She's an author, and she's also a psychic medium, and she said that basically that where you go after you commit suicide is really up to you. It's all about forgiveness. So if you can forgive yourself, then you can free yourself of that regret, that feeling of responsibility for everything that's happened, and you can kind of move on, and you can move basically into the light toward what she calls the source, because she says that we're all made up of source energy, and that, you know, if you want to move on, you can move on. But the only reason that people will stick around is because either they're too afraid to let go, and then to go on from where they come from. They're too afraid to let go. They want to cling to that life. They regret the decision, and they haven't forgiven themselves for some of the things that they've done in life. Then, that's why some people that commit suicide might actually end up becoming hauntings, because they haven't quite let go yet. So I thought both of those were definitely worth mentioning. I really like Erin Pavlina's take on it, and she also said that hell is really a state of mind. So there's no physical place. There's no, like once you go, you don't get to decide whether you go up or you go down. It's not like that at all. Either you go back to God, the source energy, because you've let go of everything in life and you've just kind of been like, okay, well, you know what, it's time to go this way now. Or you can linger, and that is really what hell is that lingering around with that guilt and that no forgiveness and that responsibility and that regret. So that's
right, and I understand people having different viewpoints. Mine, the experience that I had with souls is basically we're all going to the same place. We are all part of God. We are all part of the universal energy, or the source energy, as some people like to call it. But there's no you have to understand that if, and in my experience, with the soul is immortal. It is energy. It is not the corporeal body that we leave behind to rot. This is simply a vessel that we use in this lifetime. But when we cross over to the other side, it's, in my experience, it's not some that's it. We're either going straight back to the universal source. I mean, can you imagine? It would be a cruel, cruel joke, in my estimation, if God gave us, on average, 72 point whatever months on this earth, and that's it to get it right. And so, my experience, in dealing with the dead is we all go to the same place. And guess what, people? That includes Jack the Ripper. And people don't like to hear that. But what it is, it's lifetimes. It's like, imagine your money. And if you put it in the bank for 72 years, you're going to get so much money back from it. But if you keep it in for 1,000 years, you're going to see a bigger return on it. Right. So we, as souls, we have time to make this right. And if we choose from lifetime to lifetime to keep collecting energy, let me give you an example. I was doing public readings at Scarefest in Lexington, Kentucky, and I had this gentleman sit down, and he did what most mediums just hate. He sat down and he said, "Just read me, whoever's around." I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, I see your grandfather with you," and I described his grandfather. He always wore a brown trench coat, and they usually present themselves so that he or whoever, is trying to make the connection will recognize them. And so he recognized him through a picture. And he said, well, I don't understand why, though, he would try to get in touch with me, because he was dead before I was born. And at that moment, it was like I was jerked out of my body. And it's like a time-space thing. I swear to you, it is astral projection, or, what some people would call, the militarized version of it is remote viewing. I was in his bedroom. And there's a crib. It's him when he was a baby. And there's this swirling mass over him. And I realized that was his grandfather's energy, and that he was oppressing this baby. He was attaching himself to this baby for a purpose. And then all of a sudden, I'm like jerked back towards my body. But as I'm coming back, imagine like all of these pictures coming at you at once, like boom, 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 all this information. And what I was seeing was his grandfather's desire to hurt women. I mean, we are talking full-on butchering. And I'm like, oh, my God, it was just like one stunned moment. And I'm sitting there, and I'm looking at him, and I push his money back towards him, and I said, I'm sorry, I cannot read for you. And I said, but hear me now. You need to find out who your grandfather really was. And that way, you will know why you are having all of these thoughts of hurting women, why you want to hurt women all the time. And I swear to you, that guy, he didn't say no. He turned as red as a beet. And he stood up, and when he turned around, I saw that mass. He was being oppressed by his grandfather. And so, there are nuances to this. This is a spirit that knows how evil he was. And I know he hurt a woman. I know he killed a woman in his lifetime because I saw it. And I know that that he is still oppressing this young man. He is trying to force him to hurt women because he wants to relive that. And this soul is absolutely terrified to go to the other world. This is a terrified soul. And so what he has done, he's trying to anchor himself in this realm by connecting himself to this young man. I mean, it's a really sad situation. And whenever I was brought back into, the current time, I actually asked my spirit guide if I was to tell him anything. And it was like, that's the message that I got, that he needed to find out who his grandfather really was. And he needed to work towards trying to understand who he was and push that energy back. But I could not help him in that way. That was my chore, if you will, to do, and that was to tell him about this energy that was attached to him. But, with the other world, I don't know how much of that is actually formed by our own will, if you will, through our connection with divine source, with divine energy. Do we create basically, many dimensions of the other world, or you see what I'm saying? I mean, we talk about time, space in this dimension. Why couldn't there be different versions of time and space in the other world also? So, you get into this, it's like a Pandora's box. I mean, you open it, and there's just so many more questions than answers, and none of us, as you know, none of us have all the answers. But I will tell you this, that in my experience, and having worked with families and those who have died by their own hand, I have not seen the punitive nature of it. God is love. And let me tell you something. That's how I know when I am being channeled, because I have this incredible love for everybody, for the person in front of me, for the people I don't know, for the whole world. And that is God energy. And I can tell you from my experience of being filled with that beautiful energy, I have not felt like punitive or even sad. It was like this was a choice that they made, and they will continue along the continuum of time and space, living lives, collecting both good and bad, and they will balance that out. So if there is a negative connotation attached to suicide, they have an opportunity to work that out in another lifetime. It's really a beautiful thing, and in my worldview and other worldview, it's pretty simplistic.
Pat, are there people there to help guide them once they get to that point and they've kind of gone to the other side and they are trying to, get recycled, I guess, for lack of a better term? Are there people there to kind of help guide them and lead them? And
they don't have to. Listen to this. Now, this is what, honestly, this is what it is. We, in essence, connect with God's source. We don't need any guidance. We know what we have to do because we are now part of the whole, if you will. And I don't want to say we are now the Borg. I don't mean that. What we are is connected to God. We are full of love. We understand where we went wrong and what we need to do to make it right. We choose our next step, our next lifetime, whether to make it more difficult for us so that we can prove ourselves in a way to work off some energy, or maybe, we have a different path that we need to follow in the next lifetime, and that takes us to a higher social economic path. We know everything because we are now, as God stuff, I'm not saying we're gods, I'm saying our energy is part of God. This whole idea of nirvana, and I am not a Hindu or Buddhist, I'm definitely a universalist, but this whole idea of nothingness being everything, you have to understand when you become nothing, you become everything because you are now part of God again. And when we cross over and we are in our true form, which is spirit, guess what? That's God stuff. That is the God spark. And so we are now connected with this beautiful energy. So it hasn't been my experience that it's necessary for a spirit to have guides. I'm not saying that we aren't guided, but I'm saying that once we cross over. Now, when we are crossing over, the ancestors have gathered for us. And if you have a spirit guide, mine happens to be the angel of music, which is really ironic because I'm tone deaf. But, I guess they don't choose us and we don't choose them. And I'm not quite sure how that happens. But I don't get into the technical issues of this. So many people get into hierarchies and some people, there's a famous psychic that started a church and, gave her insight on, the different hierarchy of the spirit realm, but it's so simple. It's so beautifully simple. We are simply connected again with God, and that's all it takes. I mean, when you put it in its most simplistic, beautiful essence, that's what happens. It's not complicated.
Oh, no. God. Now, on this end of it seems so much more. Now I have so many more questions.
I know. And yet, when you look at it in that sense and say, okay, that makes sense. When we are released from this body and from the tools and troubles and lessons that we are to learn, so that we become more I don't want to say pure, but definitely more understanding and more like the energy that we truly are. That truly is a beautiful thing. And I'll be honest with you, I prayed. My mother was a very, very smart woman, very well read. And she told me, she said, Pat, have you ever thought what it would be like to be outside of the grace of God? And I'm like, that's good. Because, of course, you hear fire and hell, brimstone, all of that. And I'm like, I really, really prayed. I prayed for weeks on this. I was a bit OCD. I am OCD. So I was really thinking about it, really wanting an answer. And one day I was given the epiphany. I was given the vision. And I was somewhere else. And I'm standing in kind of a cathedral, but a part of the cathedral. And there's this beautiful stained glass window. And it's St. Michael slaying the dragon. That was what was on this. And there was a monk, and he must have been Benedictine because, he had the bald head. He had the old brown wool cassock and the, tied piece of rope as a tie belt. And he's standing there, and he has a pleasant face. And I'm just looking, and there's this beautiful streaming light. Well, all of a sudden, this light becomes much more muted and darker. And I'm looking at the monk, and all of a sudden, his face starts to twist and starts to melt, and everything is ugly. And, of course, I'm jerked back. I always call it being jerked back in the body because it's really weird. It's like time and space. I don't even know how to describe it, except all of this information comes at you. Anyway, I'm back, and I realized for me what this meant. To be outside of the grace of God means that there is no beauty. There is no peace. There is nothing of sunshine and love. It is devoid of anything as far as God energy. And I know that's, you would think, oh, well, you should have thought of that before. It makes sense. But it was such a powerful image and vision for me, and I have never forgotten that.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, it does. It makes perfect sense. Like what you're saying makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I wish any one person had all the answers. I will tell you this, that myself and other people like me who truly have a gift, and I'm not talking about cold readers or hot readers. I'm talking about those who connect with God energy from time to time. I am not afraid of death. Now, I don't want to have to go through the process because it's quite unpleasant for the body. and I will be honest with you, to separate body from soul is a painful process because you're being reborn into the other world, just like you're born into this world. And I will tell you something else for your listeners that I really feel they need to know. And again, my experience. I have never connected with a child who has crossed over that in their final moments felt pain. And I know that they are connected to their bodies because I can still sense people around. But what I truly believe in that sense, because let me tell you, in adults, I feel pain. I feel heart attacks. I feel cancer. I feel hit in the head. I feel pain. But with children, it's like the soul is floating outside the body, and yet what we call the silver cord, or it's like an umbilical cord for the soul, is still connected to the body, so that the child is without pain when they pass. It really is. It's very beautiful in a very real sense. God loves us. I mean, there is no other message other than that. So, that's my experience, and, I appreciate and I respect anyone else's experience in the other world, but I have to, I stand firmly by my experience because it is what I experience.
Right. For sure. So there is a lingering question I definitely want to ask, and you've already actually hit almost every question that I had written down here. But one of the big ones was for the people that are kind of on the periphery, that are dealing with a loved one that has passed from suicide, that is kind of lingering, or their energy has not quite given up an attachment yet, that kind of thing, or people that are just kind of around people that may be close to it. Is there anything that they can do spiritually to help these people? For the people that have already passed, is there any way that they can help them to forgive and let go and kind of go back to God source, or is there anything that can be done?
For suicides?
Mm-hmm.
Or for the people left behind?
Either, both, all of it.
Okay. You have to understand that they're not suicide. I don't know. Suicides are not languishing around suffering. They're not doing that. Let me tell you something. I honestly, again, praying, I wanted to know what they felt. I wanted to know what a spirit feels when it is, released into the other world. And I felt this incredible, and when we say joy, we have no idea really that it's such a small word. It's 3 letters, but we have no idea how powerful, true joy is. And that's what they're filled with. It's a happiness. It's knowing that God loves them. The God source loves them. They understand everything. They understand themselves. They understand the universe. They are connected with God, and so I'm not quite sure. They're not just stuck in their bedroom where they hung themselves. They're gone. And yes, they come back to us. Say a mother or a father is despondent over their child. That child, because of them, because of their energy that they're putting out, targeted for that specific spirit, can bring that energy to them. But here's the funny thing. That spirit is not there for the parent to comfort them. They are there to comfort the parent, because they're released. And it's, and I am not, listen, people, if you're depressed and stuff, do not even think that this is an easy out, because I don't know, and I am telling you, as a medium, no one who deals with spirits can tell you for sure. We don't know that there might not be some negative energy that you will have to pay off for this. All I am saying is that you are not thrown into the pits of hell because you were unable, any of us, those who have passed by their own hand, were not able to withstand, the things that they were dealing with in this realm. And that's all, that's all I want to say on that. Let me give you an example. If people were funny in this lifetime, guess what? They're still a jovial spirit. If they were serious in this lifetime, they're still a serious spirit. And sometimes the way that they manifest to us reflects that. If somebody, and that's why we often see, someone like coming back to a location that they really loved, because that's who they were in this particular lifetime. It's not. I do believe in earthbound spirits. I do believe that. I believe they're confused, and I believe that they didn't go into the light. I believe maybe, for whatever reason, they didn't follow the spirits that were sent there to guide them. And they may have their own reasons, and we all know about unfinished business. And it very well could be. But you have to understand, too, that we may get this whole concept of earthbound because time in the other world is not time here. And so you have time going very, very quickly to, in comparison to the spirit realm. And so you have 100 years now, and you have a child that's waiting for his mother. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
And he'll continue to wait because now there's a discrepancy in the two dimensions, in the two time frames. Now, this is all based on my experience. So I want to give that. Let me give you an example. I had a couple come to me, and all they said was that her brother had passed. And I said, I'm seeing that your brother was depressed, and he was in a hotel, or a motel. And I said, it was kind of a seedy motel. And she said, yes. And I said, look, I'm seeing a bottle of tequila in the bed and next to him. And so usually when it's shown that close, it means that he had pretty much consumed the entire bottle. And they said, yeah. And I'm looking at him, and I said, well, what is the number 22? Because he gave me the number 22. And they said, I don't know. And then I saw this man. I am not kidding you. I described him to a T. And it was like he shrugged his shoulders. He looked at me like I was an idiot. And then out of nowhere, he grabbed a 22 gun. And I said, oh, he's telling me it was a 22 gun. He committed suicide by gun. And they said, yes, that's exactly what happened. And it was like, but he was just jovial. It was the way that he was presenting it, looking at me like I was kind of, an idiot, but shrugging his shoulders. It was almost like he was laughing. And I said he was really, really jovial, and at least on the surface. And they said, yeah, he was always like the clown. And, I find that, too, that some of my, the spirits that I connect with often have such a good veneer of either very jovial or, there was a veneer over their depth of despondency. But anyway, so, yeah, we're basically the same people. It's not like we're whitewashed simply because now we're dead. See what I'm saying? So, but that's my experience.
All right. Well, very interesting. Yeah, we so the kind of what I'm keen into here is that we had someone come to us, and they were saying that their loved one had taken their lives, and then that they had been appearing to them in their dreams every single night, and they were really angry, and they regretted what they did a lot, and they were really angry, and they had all these things that they needed this person to do, and say they were causing this person to have to drive basically all down the East Coast every single weekend to try and take care of these affairs, and this person is racking their brain because they didn't know, like, okay, well, we don't know, I'm just trying to figure out what you're telling me here. So that is kind of what keyed this whole episode off, is because we know that there's more people out there that had questions like that had those kind of experiences, and we just kind of wanted to try and help them.
Right. And again, that's unfinished business. So you have a spirit that is, was he angry at this particular person?
No,
or was he angry?
He was angry at another person, and basically it was his ex-wife, and he was trying to keep his ex-wife from getting something that was in his house. So.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, as you said, we have choices, and if we again, we aren't whitewashed, and so when this happens to us, we have a choice. And if you look at the Holy Books, it pretty much says that we as human beings have choices. I mean, in both the Bible and in the Quran, it talks about God bringing the angels, and in the Quran, He also brought the jinn before Him, and He said, "Bow down to man." And in the Quran, the angels bowed down to man. But the jinn said, "Why should I, who am made of smokeless fire, bow to a creature made of mud?" Correct? Okay, we have choices, just like the jinn did. He chose not to bow. And so what happened to them, if you will remember, is that they were thrown out of Eden and into something they call Jinnistan, which is another, it is a world around a world, our world, another dimension. So yes, I mean, you can be filled with love. You can feel God calling you, but until there's a complete separation of soul and you go into that light, you're not. And if you listen or read about near-death experiences, the closer they get to the light, the more the love they feel, the more of God's love that they feel. And there is, I've never read of anyone who's had a very near-death experience. In other words, they almost didn't come back. They had been dead for, a few minutes. They're not jumping up and down saying, "Ooh, gosh, I'm glad I'm back." I mean, they came back into their bodies. It was full of pain. They had the same troubles, et cetera, et cetera. And often they will speak fondly of what they experienced as they were doing the process. What happens with a lot of spirits is that they have spirit guides that are trying to bring them across, that are telling them to follow, that go into the light. They're trying to get them there, but they have anger. They're mad or they're attached or there's something that's unfinished that is overriding that. So they never get close enough. They never get close enough during the separation to that God energy so that they're completely filled with that joy and that love. And there they are. And so, yes, it does happen. And yes, you.
When you don't go to Geico.com, car insurance can seem intense. Like breakup R&B intense.
I thought you said you loved the sweater that I got you. If you didn't, you could have told me.
Geico makes it easy. Just go to Geico.com anytime to update or check your policy without all the extra drama.
I even had a gift receipt.